Hello, this is Bill, and welcome to Billboard Comics. This is I'd like to introduce you today to a sub channel of the um, grand Billboard Comics empire. I like to call Growing Up Comics. This, as another stuff, stems from a whole bunch of books that I had an idea of doing. A Basically, once you get to be my age, you get to have a whole bunch of um, looking back on your life. As the ticking time clock of mortality creeps in, um, you reflect upon your life and all kinds of stuff that you've done that you wish you could have done and didn't, stuff that you did that you appreciate, and you know, just a whole bunch of nostalgia. Um, and I was actually turning this to the world of comic books, uh, as I kind of hear um, you hear something in the background. I'm doing this outside because it's a pretty day and it's a pretty outside kind of thing. So hopefully it won't get too loud. Um, if it is, I'll cut it out. That it happens. Um, but as you get to be the old age ruminations, for me as a comic book collector, I turned it to the world of comics. Um, and as I look through the world of comics, I am thinking of how comic books changed since I started buying them. Not even collecting them, just buying them. Um, uh, and it changed quite a bit. I'm a big fan of history. I like to actually record history as it happens. Um, like the verbal history of people who lived through it is always fascinating to me. And while I might think like the world of comic book collecting or comic book buying or the comic book fandom doesn't really require kind of like the same kind of gravitas as, say, the Civil War or World War II or Vietnam or whatever the historical thing that you wanted to have done. Um, I do. I think the way we learn about our history is through people who lived it, and I'm going about to give this to you now. Um, just to set up like what this is, basically it's going to be like kind of like a reminiscence of my days, um, starting in the 1970s to today, about collecting comic books and buying comic books and enjoying comic books and reading comic books and pretty much everything that has to do with comic books. Um, is this going to be? I'm thinking. I would like to consider this more as being kind of like me sitting on the front porch of a general store next to the Cracker Barrel and say, like, talk to you friendly about what happened, and hopefully it doesn't drop down into like, in my day we had to go uphill both ways in the snow to get our comic books, and we liked it. Hopefully, we won't go into that. Hopefully, it will be more of a kind of like a invitational, informational. Well, you're invited to like this and subscribe and pass this on and comment and whatnot. Um, your reminiscence about this, if something topics I talk about, um, if if you have memories of these too. Um, Basically, I'm going to kind of like go through my experiences as a comic book collector, a comic book buyer, um, and this video is going to be a setting the stage kind of video. I'll go into more specific topics as we go on. Uh, some of the topics I'm thinking about doing is like the comic book that made me a collector, uh, the comic books that made me love the Avengers, uh, you know, certain books that I come across that I can't find anymore, but help form me as being a comic book collector. I wanted to learn more about the medium. Um, So hopefully, like this one is going to be basically setting the stage for it, um, like of the whole concept. So hopefully you like this one. I'll go into more specifics as we go on later in period. Um, so basically, give you like this kind of like giving you my bona fides for talking about this. Um, Number one, I'm very old. Not as old as some comic book collectors out there. I'm not going to take status that I'm the oldest one. But I've been around. I've seen a lot of things. I've seen a lot of things change in the hobby. I've seen a lot of things change in the way comic books were collected and stuff like this. I have been collecting comic books seriously for since 1982, which as of today's date is about 43 years ago. So most of my like teenage and adult life, I've been getting comic books, filing comic books, and doing all that. And a lot of things have changed since when I started back in 1982 to today, obviously. Um, just like if you started collecting in the 90s, a lot of things changed from the 90s to today also. But also, before I even started doing collecting comic books, I would buy comic books. Um, see, growing up in the 70s was a weird time for like ephemeral education, like entertainment kind of thing. Um, like we didn't have video games. Uh, like Atari came around in 1977, and it was priced at around $149 per system, to $179 per somewhere around those that network, uh, which would be like $850 in today's money. Um, and that's not kind of you have to back then you had to get cartridge for them and stuff like this. Um, but that came like after like at my first like in 1977. Action figures became popular in 1977 with the onset of the um, Star Wars figures. Star Wars figures uh, usually basically any kind of like pop culture thing would be a doll. Your the 12-inch or the 8-inch or whatever. That's how you get the stuff. But Kenner decided to revitalize the entire toy industry by kind of keeping it down kind of tiny little. Um, but back when I got my first comic book, um, those weren't around. There's basically per my memory, and I don't know if this is correct. Uh, my first comic book I ever bought was Detective Comics number 451. Um, the reason why I have specific memories of buying it, like at the general store, just the front of like the park where I lived in, um, and like getting it off like a cascading metal rack. I also got like some other ones, like I think a Richard Rich and a Dennis the Menace. But that's the first superhero movie comic book I remember getting. The thing that makes me kind of like question this is that the book was released in had an on sale date of 6/26/1975, which would mean I was three and a half when I bought that book. Is it possible? Of course, yeah, it is. Um, but then again, like my parents always said like I was an early reader. I started reading before I even got into school, and I was like, we have the crowd that way. But I don't know if I was like comic book readers and stuff like this. Like I think like maybe memory is a funny thing. I could barely remember what I had for dinner yesterday, let alone what happened when I was like 50 years ago. Um, but I seem to recall that my mom was kind of thinking, "Are you sure? Are you sure you can read that?" And I could look at the pictures. Oh, okay, fine. I recently we got it from my collection, and I remember it very specifically. It had the first page was a woman crying into a pool on her knees, crying into a pool, reaching into a pool, like reaching out to the camera to us. And ended with Batman on the beach with a shadow on his face that kind of make him look like Batman. And that's when I first realized, what if Batman gets a suntan? That's why he works at night, but like still, like you get a suntan and tell like, wow, you have like. But I digress. But that's the first comic book I remember buying, and like I said, hit the stores at 6/26, 1975. Um, During this time, like I said, it was before Atari became popular. Um, I think it was named the Atari VCS system. It wasn't renamed to the Atari 2600 until I think 1982. Um, Before like action figures, the toys we had there were Amigos, and if you had like say $3.99 retail, suggested manufacturer's retail price. Although you could probably get it for I'm looking through store ads. I might put one up here. You could get them for under $2, under $3, but a lot of places like 250 to something like this. Depends on what kind of stock they had in. Those were the closest thing you get for superhero figures. I remember having a bunch of Fisher Price toys and stuff along those lines. Um, but the main thing for the kids growing up as hobbies were either comic books, reading them, or baseball cards. And I will go. There's going to be another video detailing my history of baseball cards coming up soon and how it helped lead into my collecting comic books. Hopefully, you will find that interesting. Um, However, um, those were our limited options. We didn't have a lot of stuff to go on there, and that's why comic books became more popular back then than they are now. They kind of died off when other things came in, like like I said, video games, Pokemon, um, CDs, DVDs. Back then you only had like vinyl records, and if you're or 45 records. I remember I got a couple 45s as a kid back then, um, but it wasn't like the digital age now. You can just like hit a button on your iPhone, you have your song bought for you, and you can listen to it anytime you want to. You had basically these big vinyl discs that you had to get out and like put on. There's 6 songs on one side, and then that is over. You had to flip it over to get the rest of the 6 songs, and it was more of a event, a procedure. Um, so a lot of people like it wasn't really disposable, easy, quick entertainment. Um, Unlike the comic books and like the baseball cards were. Baseball cards cost about 15 cents a pack back then. You get 10 cards, and most sets had like 600 cards in it, 660, and you'd have to keep on buying the packs to get the stuff. Comic books were about 25 cents back then. A little bit more expensive than the baseball cards, and but you could still like if there's fall stories, you could follow a story every month for like say $3 a year. I think the math's right on that. Um, so that's how I became involved in comic books. Um, like it wasn't until like like I have one particular comic book that actually made me a collector. I will go into in a future video. But back in the '70s, comic books were everywhere, and I will also that's another like another video. I'm going to do everything in there, listing all the places you could buy comic books. Um, it's a very exciting time. Like it's in like here, there, like where they're nowhere. Uh, you could get them pretty much anywhere you went to, and each specific location has advantages and disadvantages, and I'll discuss that in a um, future video. Um, but part of me thinks like in my ruminations, like, if I didn't have like the easy access to these comic books and have comic books being an accepted way of having like a like a member of like entertaining kids, like my parents just like, okay, get in the comic book, I'll keep them occupied for 3 to 4 hours, and we could just go about doing whatever we're doing. Would I even become a comic book collector today? How does it differ from the comic book collectors who get into the industry today? I mean, like I like my inspiration to go into comic books were because I saw the characters on the Super Friends cartoon. Um, and that's pretty much the only thing that happened, and also like reruns of the Batman 1966 series. So those are the things that led me to believe that. Is that similar, different than kids today who see like Avengers Endgame and decide they want to go out and get every single Captain America or Thanos appearance and stuff like this? Um, so, but that's where it came from in the comic book. It was like the comic books were just a form of entertainment. And to be honest with you, um, a lot of them was like for me disposable. Like a lot of comic books I got back when I was like 3 or 4 or 5, I don't have today. Um, like it was kind of like, okay, I'm done reading it. I read it till it fell apart. I would give it to like a friend who had one on trade and go back and forth and stuff like this. Or when I was done, like throw it out with the newspapers and stuff like this. Yeah, yeah, I know. Um, and just think back to like how the taste changed. Like I used to get a lot of Richie Rich comic books. I used to love Richie Rich comic books. Um, and being a kid, that it seemed right at me. Like, hey, as a kid being a millionaire, how how could it be any better? It's like, um, not so much in superheroes and stuff like this. Like, I remember picking up a couple Superman books and like this and that, and Spider-Man books, and vague memories of you know picking up random books, like a copy of Seven Soldiers. No. The Secret Society of Supervillains. Yeah, that's it. It's right cover where they both fight against each other. If I'll try to put up there. I remember getting that as a kid, and it sticks with me. And I'm trying to, like, as I'm collecting now, today in my golden years, I'm trying to go through that and go through that. Um, Today, like that's a whole different universe than it is today. Um, like I said, I don't know how people get into comic books nowadays, maybe through the movie and stuff like this, but it's not as inclusive as it was. I mean, if I wanted to, I could have kept every comic book from the 1970s. Um, that first issue of um, Detective Comics 451 that I got, that I remember as being my first issue of a comic book I actually bought. Actually, my parents bought it for me because, 3.5-year-olds don't usually have bank accounts or credit cards or like that back then. Um, that was the like an acceptable thing. Like these kids don't have the idea of going. I could. It was like within walking distance of my place of living. I could go there anytime I want to. But if I want one, buy one and take it home with me. Kids these days don't have that kind of thing. If they want to buy like um, a comic book, they have to go to a comic book store typically, or if they want to get like a trade paperback, they'd have to go to a bookstore and stuff like this, or go through online sources to try to get stuff like that. Um, it's not exactly as easy and acceptable as just going to a store, picking up a comic book, and leaving with it. Um, and that kind of like realize like that kind of thing is missing. Like the kids like might actually miss that I had that they didn't have. Their experience is totally different than mine. But again, getting back to the purpose of this whole thing, I know I'm kind of rambling, but I'm just talking to you straight from the heart. Um, is just kind of like give you understanding about like the experience of like being a comic book collector back in the '70s and the '80s, and maybe even the '90s and stuff like that. That I grew up with, uh, and like just to let you know, like an immersive kind of experience of like me talking to you about like what it was like back then. So you could have some kind of like perspective and like knowledge of the time from somebody who lived through it. Hopefully, like that. If you do, if you want to see more of this, it sounds like a great idea, and you want to do more like this, hit the subscribe button and hit the little bell thing for notifications. Um, Also, like the thing; it helps a lot. And you know, uh, comment if there's anything that you might remember that you want me to cover or go over. If I had anything experience with it, I'll talk about it in this series. Um, but hopefully, all of you will enjoy this. And if you are coming along with me on this, thanks for joining us for the ride, and I hope you enjoy it. This is Bill signing off, and just remember, keep collecting.